Hi, I'm Randall from Randall's ESL Cyber Listening Lab, providing tips on language learning, culture, and human development. And today's topic is a portrait of a private language teacher in Armenia. And let me go ahead and introduce this topic today. I think one of the most fascinating things about life is realizing that the experiences of other people throughout the world echo my own life's experiences. And in other words, I think often we try to emphasize sometimes the differences in cultures and language and food. But the reality is there are a lot more similarities that bind us together as human beings. And I think these shared traits should be the focus of everything we do. If we think about it, friendship and compassion and hope for a better life, these are universal hopes that I think we see around the world. And I think this is particularly true in my own profession of teaching English as a second language. And I think that the advent of the internet has brought down barriers that have often kept us separated from cultures around the world. Now, fortunately, we have more opportunities to connect with people from around the world, share in our own experiences. And I think today's episode will be very interesting for teachers and students. And we will be talking with a teacher who is forging a successful life in an ancient and historically rich part of the world, Armenia, but is doing so in a very modern way by teaching online. And Shushanik will be introducing her country, talking a little bit about the evolution of language instruction in her country, also explaining the different tools and techniques she uses in her language teaching, and talking about her hopes for the future. And I think this broadcast will be of interest to both teachers and students who are trying to seek common ground with people from around the world. So with that introduction, what I'd like to do is I'd like to bring on Shushanik. And so Shushanik, welcome to today's broadcast.
Good morning there.
Well, great. And today we're going to be talking, as I mentioned, a little bit about human connection, about how we can broaden our understanding of not only the language teaching profession, but people around the world. Before we begin, Shushanik, I just want to check. It looks like we have Nelson is joining us. We have someone also from El Salvador. I admire your patience to achieve your goals. Now, some of these, I don't know how to pronounce your names. Everyone is going to have to help me. Isra says, good morning, Randall. We have another visitor from Poland. Let's welcome. And Guillermo is coming from Monterey. Wow. And I know that, I don't know, Shushanik, if you took a look at any of the comments, I know that Riyadh from Tunisia had some comments, and we'll try to address those today as well. So let's just go ahead and begin, Shushanik. And if we can go ahead and first of all, just do a brief introduction of yourself, and then tell us a little bit about Armenia.
Yeah, well, okay. I am Shushanik Mamajanyan. I'm from Armenia, and so I have graduated from the Yerevan State University, the Faculty of Romance and Germanic Philology, and in general, my major is linguist. So you see here the picture of my country. This is the capital city of Armenia, Yerevan. And here, like at the back of the picture, you see the biblical mount. It's called Ararat. Now, it's not in the territory of Armenia, but like it's our biblical mountain. So Armenia is a very, very ancient country. The capital city was founded in 782 BC by Arishti the Great. And Armenia is famous for adopting Christianity as an official religion in 301 AD. And here before that, it used to be a pagan country. So here under the picture, you see the Temple of Garni. It's one of the pagan buildings in Armenia. And there are like very beautiful churches. Like after the Christianity, there appeared a lot of churches in Armenia. So it's famous for its like history, for its, I don't know, culture and cuisine also. Very ancient, but also a very developing country here.
Well, great. And I think one of the interesting things that people should note is that it is a melding of both ancient and modern as well.
Yeah, yes, it's like, yeah, like we try to mix both. We are an ancient country, but like we don't think anciently. We try to be very developing, very modern, open-minded to everything.
Well, great. Well, let's go on. Thank you very much for that introduction. Let's just talk a little bit about, before we go in to some of the aspects of online education and your experiences and so forth, can you just tell us a little bit about the Armenian language educational system? Again, for me growing up, I often in junior high school, we had choices of English, of course, and then we had Spanish, Spanish, French, and German, and so forth. But tell us a little bit about the language education system there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So then, language education in the schools starts from the first grade, of course. At the first grade, we start learning Armenian, the alphabet. I don't know, some things of the Armenian language, which is the official language of our country. And then at the second grade, we start learning Russian. And after the second grade, at the third grade, we start learning English. I talk about public schools. Okay. It's very different. In public schools and in private schools, it's very different because private schools may have their directions. They can choose another languages. And also, English is not a mandatory in all the schools. For example, in different schools, they may choose another language. For example, in some schools, the next language is German. In some other schools, the next language is French. It depends, I don't know, on the region. It depends on the school. So it depends. And here, but Russian is kind of mandatory. People learn Russian from the second grade. And yeah, here, education system of languages in Armenia is pretty well. I would say that many schools work on it very hard. Nowadays, there are many schools where pupils and also adults can learn Chinese, Japanese, and it is very, very good for the people who want to develop, who want to educate themselves. It's really very good opportunity here. Yeah.
Okay. Now, you're not from the capital. Is that correct?
Yes, I'm not from the capital. I am from a very tiny, very small village.
Now, when you say very tiny, very small, how small is tiny?
So the population here is about like 2,000 people nowadays, if I'm not mistaken. And it is a very, yes, it's also a peripheral village. It borders on Azerbaijan.
Okay. Again, hi, I'm Randall from Randall's ESL Cyber Listening Lab with Shushanik, explaining and talking about her experiences in Armenia. And we want to let's take a look at any of the comments that have come in. We know that there are going to be comments, and we encourage comments about your own language teaching experiences. Shushanik has just mentioned about the languages that are often taught in Armenia. Good morning. Again, we have some other comments. We have some other greetings from Vietnam. I don't know. And from Tunisia. So it's great. Again, as we're in the presentation, feel free to share any of your comments regarding language teaching, your experiences about what languages are being taught in the schools and so forth. So let's talk. And I encourage our listening audience to share their experiences as well. But talk just briefly about a typical language class. Maybe as you were growing up, perhaps what we see today, what would you see? And let's say either in elementary, junior high, or high school, what would that look like?
Okay, when I was growing up, it was very different from the things we have nowadays, because I remember when I was a pupil at school, it was very, very different. I remember our school textbooks, which were mainly concentrated on grammar, and we just learned academic English only. Well, we learned a lot of things, a lot of stuff from grammar, but at the end of the day, we couldn't speak anything because we knew all the rules, but we just couldn't pronounce anything.
Now, what percent? So what percent, and this would be a good question for the audience as well in their own teaching situations. At that time, what percent was taught in Armenian? What percent of the class was taught in English? And what was pretty typical?
What percent?
Yeah, about what percent?
Yeah, for example, I don't know, if I take it, if we take only speaking, it was like very, very little percentage of the lessons, maybe 5 or 10% of the lesson. It was like just speaking. We did a lot of translations, which like helped to gain some vocabulary, but they didn't help to get speaking practice. And like 80% of the lesson, it was maybe some translations, and the other 10% is like word communication, but not very much. Yeah, 10% is speaking, 10% like communication among the students, among the pupils, and with the teacher, and the 80% it was like kind of grammar rules, grammatical aspects. But I guess as a pupil, it was not interesting to me because I wanted to speak. I wanted to be able to communicate. Now it's kind of different, I guess. In many schools, they also concentrate on speaking very much. And also there are some language centers. They also concentrate mainly on the speaking. And I think that it's really impossible to learn a language without grammar. But also, we should not make the students learn just grammar. We shouldn't make them learn grammatical rules. And in the end, they just cannot speak anything. They cannot speak the language. And this is a problem, I guess.
And I think this might be, I don't know what you think. I think this might be a common experience of others. And we would like to hear from other teachers where you mentioned that a lot of the focus was on translation. The teacher spoke the native language. Some students maybe were even wondering, why isn't the teacher speaking more in the native language? But you said, in English, but you said maybe in language learning centers that is changing. Is that what you meant?
Mm-hmm. Yes. In language learning centers, now there is a huge change because nowadays language centers, first of all, the teachers, the lecturers concentrate only on English. First of all, their main goal is to concentrate on English, and also the lessons are conducted only in English in Armenia. Like we try to use the English language as much as possible, and only in extreme cases we use our like vernacular language. We use Armenian to, for example, if the student cannot understand, you say that there is no chance we use Armenian in the classroom. But it was very different, and I guess it's very different in schools nowadays as well, because they use Armenian very much. This is my opinion. I am not sure in that because I haven't taught in school. Yeah, I haven't taught.
And we'll talk a little bit about your experiences teaching at language centers. Let's see if we have any other comments coming up. We have Lika from Georgia says hello. Tutor Joe says, best wishes to our collaborator, friend, Shushanik. Greetings from Costa Rica. Taylor says, good morning. I tried to avoid the native language. And I think this is related to what you just mentioned. One of the challenges, I'm glad that Taylor from Costa Rica is chiming in on this. He says, I try to avoid the native language in all of my classes. Sometimes it's really hard to do so, but it's the best for the students. There are tons of ways of making someone understand you that may include your body language regarding what you're discussing. And I think this is a really important, I don't know if you ever experienced this, Shushanik, but when I was in high school, my Spanish teacher only spoke Spanish. And she was the worst teacher ever because I was frustrated in the beginning. I thought, well, I want to understand you. But I think Kayla is making a great point. We have hello from Armenia, Shushanik. Is one of the best tutors. Hugs and kisses to you. Probably someone that you know?
Yeah.
All right. And we have Armenia. Let's see. Armenia is our country neighbors. I'm glad to be listening to her. Another thing is, can you give us constantly this kind of speeches? Perhaps this comment is, I like the opportunity of sharing voices that are kind of resonating the same challenges. And I think what Kayla mentioned from Costa Rica is that type of experience that I'd like to hear. You mentioned that, well, you know, a lot of teachers are speaking in the native language, trying to help students. But the question would be, I think for some students, they feel frustrated at times because they want to know. And I think Kaylor mentioned a really good point, maybe using body language, pictures, any other media that is really popular and able to help us make that transition. All right, well, let's talk a little bit about, you mentioned that you are a linguist. How did you make the decision to become an English teacher? I mean, did you wake up one day in your English class when you were 12 years old and said, I don't want to do that. I don't want to be a doctor. I want to be an English teacher. Now, what was the transition? Because I'm assuming that your first thought was not becoming an English teacher. How did you make that transition?
Okay. Well, in fact, I was just 7 or 8 years old when I decided to become an English language teacher because I liked my first English language teacher very, very much. And he was like a great teacher. I liked her very much. Though he taught us like 2 months, no more, I guess. He just managed to teach us the letters and then he left the school. But I liked him so much that I just decided, like as a 7-year-old child, I decided to be English language teacher. Whatever it happens, I'm going to teach people English. And due to him, I just fell in love with the language. And then I was like, I remember myself and my best friend translating some English songs in our textbooks or in our just copybooks. And we were so happy. We were so proud of that we can translate and understand the songs or understand the text. And it was really good experience because I guess my teacher was like, at that time, he was an idol for me. And I wanted to speak as he could speak, as he spoke at that time. And so that's why I always say that teachers play a huge role in the lives of their pupils, in the lives of their students. So they should do everything to motivate them, to give them a reason to learn their subject. And yeah, that's how I decided to become an English language teacher. But I studied yes, sorry.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, but I studied linguistics at the university. Here in the university, we have this English language. We get the qualification of a teacher as well. But the main point was on linguistics. And it was also a very good experience because you know the language from all the aspects, from all the angles. And it's also a really good experience. You can know more about the language and also you can become a qualified English teacher.
Now, if I could just pause for a minute. And again, I would be interested in hearing from any of our viewers. You mentioned about the inspiration that your teacher had on you when you were 7 and 8 years old. And you mentioned a good model, someone that motivated you. Question is, did that teacher use a lot of technology in the class, or was it their example enthusiasm that made you consider teaching?
Well, at that time, we didn't have these opportunities to know a lot of technologies, to apply them in the classroom. The only thing I remember, it was like saying the letters very, very quickly, and with each letter a word. And it was like the best thing I remember from my English classes. It was really interesting. And there weren't any techniques, like any special techniques, any things that I would like recall now. But I guess that this inspiration comes from his enthusiasm. When you love the children, they also love you back. When you love your students, they love you back. And that is the most important thing, I guess. When you feel that you're loved in a class, it inspires you. I don't know. Maybe I'm the only one, but...
No, and I think that is what I was trying to make mention at the beginning, is these universal traits of love and compassion, enthusiasm. I mean, you can have a teacher who uses wonderful technology, uses the internet, but yet does not connect on a deeper level with the students. And so I'm glad that you brought that up. And that was what I was trying to look for, is those universal traits that motivated you to become a teacher. Let's see if we have any other comments here. Kaylor made a comment. Thank you for this webinar. I'm glad that you're participating. Senda says, students love learning English and try to speak as much as they can, but using the native language is sometimes useful. And I would agree. I think, Shushanik, you would agree too that sometimes it can be useful. We're not saying that you should never use the language, right? We're
Yeah,
talking.
for example, me, I avoid using Armenian when I'm teaching my Armenian students. But for example, there may be some people who are like very impatient or who are like older than me, and they're like, "Oh, tell me the word, say me the translation. I cannot wait." Or, "Okay, I just don't want to waste my time on this." So I'm like, okay, if the person doesn't want to spend time on listening, it's okay. You can just say. Usually, I use English, and I also use these pictures, body language. I don't know, some things that are very useful during the lesson. But when you have students who are very impatient or who just don't like waiting, I guess it's the best way to use native language, especially when they ask you, just give me the translation. So you don't want your students to be like, I don't know, to say something bad at the end. Yeah.
And I think what I want to bring up with Senda's comment, I think also it could be useful, especially when students get extremely frustrated. They feel like giving up. They feel like it's not worth the time. And I think by using that native language in that particular case can show your humanity, can show I'm concerned about you in this particular case. So Senda, I'm glad that you brought that up. Riyadh says, my mom was my motivator, inspiration. Right. Family members can be a great inspiration to us all. We have another. Shaman, so proud of you. Someone you know?
My best friend.
Okay, good. Well, welcome. I'm glad that she's able to. Senda also makes a comment. Not all of them. Some of the students are very fond of English, and they are very glad to attend English sessions at school. Pioneer School students, as an example. Peter mentions, I want to become an English teacher in the future. That's great. Peter, please share what has been your motivation to do that. Fatma says, it depends on teachers' competence and behavior. The quality of knowledge increases in private schools in Tunisia. So an example of maybe competency. And I'm not saying that Shushanik, you and I are not saying that native language should never be used. We're just saying that judicious use. And I think especially when students are frustrated, having a hard time and so forth. And Nicolas says, I would like you to speak Spanish one day. You know, I'm even thinking about creating an episode of me speaking in Spanish, and you can see of my struggles and what has tried to motivate me as well. All right, great ideas. Those are great. So, Shushanik, let us go on now to talk about, we talked about your decision to become an English teacher, but let's talk about where you were teaching in an English language center and you made that transition to online teaching. How did that happen?
Well, I didn't used to think that teaching online may be very interesting, but I saw many announcements, vacancies for online English teachers. And once I came across an announcement by tutorjoe.com. Currently, I work at this platform. And I came across the announcement, and then I just decided to apply. I just decided to apply for the vacancy. And when I applied, so we talked with Tutor Joe, and we decided to work together, and he explained me how it works. So it was very spontaneous. Like very spontaneously, I just decided to become an online teacher. And it was so fun. Yeah, it was so fun. It was very interesting experience as well, because I could never ever think it could be very interesting. And after this COVID-19 situation started, like lockdown, quarantine, we couldn't go out, and we still are at home. We cannot go out, and it's like very interesting because I don't know, it was my luck maybe to come across this announcement.
Well, and that's great. And one of the things that at least I know, it sounds like you feel very confident about that. I know for me, when I started to do more online instruction as part of the university where I teach, I was so afraid. I mean, it was like, you know, of course I use technology, but the idea of connecting with people in a different way just kind of made me a little bit nervous, and perhaps others feel the same as well. But it sounds like it was something that resonated with you. It was something that you felt very comfortable with. That's great. Now, what I'd like to do is I'd like to make the transition from this discussion Um, we have some questions from Riyadh that we're going to get to. Right now we have we have some more greetings from Mexico. We have another greeting from Taiwan. That's great. And here are some questions that we're going to get to. This is Riyadh's questions, and we're going to break those down just a little bit. And Riyadh says, let me read through these, and these will be connected. Great topic. I'm interested in the platform that you use, how you motivate students, how you make sure students are under control and entirely concentrating. Do you ask them to turn on your cameras? Because some students turn on and off the cameras. Those are a lot of interesting questions. And let's go ahead and take some of these first of all. And as we talk about the transition, I want to talk about lesson plans, teaching tools, your daily schedule in conjunction with some of these questions from Riyadh and others. So let's talk about, first of all, about lesson plans, and then we'll go from there. How do you organize some of the lessons and content? And tell us a little bit about your students.
Yeah. Okay. So when I about lesson plans, first of all, at tutorjoe.com we have our lesson plan that is very strict. We know what are we going to do every day. We have our plan. We update it every day. We finish a topic, we just update the topic. So at tutorjoe.com, it's updated every day by tutorjoe or by us. It doesn't matter. We have our lesson plans and we all know what we are going to do on that day. What comes to this Armenian language center, here again, we have our lesson plans set. They are set and you cannot change it. Well, you can modify them sometimes. If you have, for example, unique case of a student, for example, you need more lessons, okay, you can discuss both with tutorjoe, both with the language center I worked. So it's very open, very flexible. There is no need to be stressed or something like that. Yeah, we have our concrete lesson plans.
So then, in other words, you're giving an example where you're working for a particular group or company. They've already created the lesson plans for you.
Yes.
You have those.
Yes.
All right. And I think that could be similar for some individuals that are working online. I know that we have others like Elaine last week was talking, or 2 weeks ago was talking about devising her own lessons. So there can be that balance of working with a company that has those lessons already for you, and then others who are devising their own. All right. Yes. Let's go on then. No matter how you come up with the lessons, and again, Riyadh was asking, what type of platforms do you teach? And this could be relevant to both teachers and students of what options are available out there.
Yeah. So we use this Skype very much. We use Skype as an app to communicate with our students. Also, we use Microsoft Teams. There are some students who prefer Microsoft Teams, so we use it. And it's also very comfortable, very convenient. You can use it and no problems. I haven't had any problems yet.
Now, let me stop you right there. What would be the difference? You said some prefer Microsoft Teams. What would be perhaps an advantage of using that platform over something else like Skype?
Yeah, for example, there are some students who have business account on Skype and they cannot connect. They have some problems there and they cannot connect, or I can't add them as a contact. So that's why they use Microsoft Teams. It's okay. I see no difference in general in a connection or something like that. On both platforms, you can share your screen. You can turn on or off your camera. It's up to you. And by the way, about this turning on and off the camera, well, when I work with adults, it's up to them to turn on or off their cameras. If they feel free, they can turn it on. If they say, for example, oh, I'm not in the mood of that, or, oh, for example, I'm having a snag with my lesson, I don't want to, it's all okay. It's just up to them. And me also, I say, well, okay, I want or I don't want, it's all up to me. But when we work with children, we ask them to share their screens to see what's going on their screens. Do they follow the lesson or not? Are they doing something else or not? So it's very important, because with children you should be very, very focused, and sometimes sometimes strict, because some of them like to take the advantage of you and just play some video games or I don't know what. And about the tools, the things we use Randall's ESL Cyber Listening Lab. And
I don't know that website. What is that website?
It's very interesting. I really recommend it. You can go and see. There are a lot of interesting things there. So you can just enter there and
so that's one of the tools. So you use some websites as part of your lessons as well.
Yes. We use some websites, and also we use Espresso English website. It's also very good for pronunciation.
Now, what was the name? I'm sure people are going to ask about that.
The name of it is Espresso English.
Okay. And what we can do is if you could do this right after the broadcast, we'll have some show notes on Facebook. We can list that particular website for people to make reference to. That's great.
Yeah. So here you can just, for example, if your student has difficulties with pronunciation, there are so many videos about pronunciation, about vocabulary, about many things. So you can ask them to watch these videos, and they are very good videos. So they can watch and learn everything. Well, we try to cover all the topics, everything, and to solve all the problems also during the lesson. And they are very effective.
Yeah. And these are what we'd like to do is I'd like to look at some of the comments, and I encourage people. Again, I'm Randall from Randall's ESL Cyber Listening Lab with Shushanik from Armenia. And I see another comment that came in a little bit earlier about the difference between conventional classroom learning and online learning. I'm going to ask people who are watching some of their challenges, some of the benefits that they've experienced with those different environments. I just want to see what other comments we have. Love and proud of you, Shushan. Tutor Joe says, working along with students overseas is a challenge when you're not able to communicate in their mother languages, but using English as a first language every single moment. I think that's a really good point in that particular case. Another question says, how do you keep students motivated and engaged in online learning? What would you do? How do you keep them motivated?
Well, okay. So keeping them motivated, I guess, is one of the most difficult things because of the situation as well, not only because of online teaching, but also because of the situation. So I don't know why people like motivation nowadays. So I try to be very open to them. If they have a problem connected with the language, if they have a problem connected with the topic, I just ask them so many times, if you don't understand the word, if you don't get this word right, just tell me and I'm going to explain you as many times as you wish. And motivation is like when you are interested in the lesson. First of all, the teacher should be very concentrated and very focused on the lesson. And also the teacher should be first of all, the teacher should be very motivated, I guess. And then your motivation goes even behind the screens, and it also gets the person also gets your motivation. I try to give them some short texts to read, some short stories to read, and when they understand, they say, "Oh, you see, I can already understand this. So this is a huge thing I can do now." So
that's a huge motivation.
Yes.
Yeah, and I think that's great.
Or some videos, even when they watch some videos, very short videos, or when they listen to a song and they can understand the song, or even this very short and simple video, they're like, oh my gosh, I can understand this already. So this is a great thing I can do. And I think that it is very good point. Well, also as a language learner, because I also used to be a language learner, and now again, I am a language learner. I know that it is very good to give these short stories or even these videos, something to motivate them. Well, you motivate them secretly, only you know that you motivate them, but they get really motivated and very happy due to these techniques.
Yeah, and I think one of the things we're saying too is that when students experience success, they become motivated. One of the things that I've tried to learn is that in the past, I would say, you can do it. It's not so hard. But then realizing if a student is experiencing great struggle, if they're experiencing pressure from home to learn, and I don't validate the struggle, meaning it is hard. Thanks for sharing those feelings. That can increase motivation. And as a non-native speaker, you can motivate students by showing, I'm learning as well. I'm growing as well. And I think those are important comments as well. All right,
Yes.
going to take a couple more comments and then we're going to move on. Let's see here. We saw that keeping students motivated and engaged. I think that can be a real hard thing. Others, depending on the skill you teach, choose what to use. So meaning depending on what skill, what level, you can determine what to use. Riyadh says right here, the best listening website. Perhaps he's talking about your website or maybe my website, I'm not sure.
Yes,
but there are a lot of tools that are out there that I think could be used. And again, we have what has been the most challenging skill to teach online? What do you think about that?
Yeah, I guess the best, the most challenging skill to teach online is, I'm not sure. They're not very easy, or they're not the easiest and the most difficult or the most challenging, but really it's maybe the most challenging is teaching grammar. It's not a skill. Teaching grammar is really very, very challenging. You should be very concrete, very precise, because first of all, you don't see the person face to face, and you may turn on your video, but it's not the same. And teaching grammar is really very challenging. Sometimes even before the lessons or some hours ago or something. Okay, I know that I'm going to teach this grammar today, this grammar topic today. I just prepare myself for the lesson as well. So grammar is really I guess grammar is really very challenging.
And I think grammar can be challenging in a way because often my students, for example, they're watching movies, Hollywood movies, and they say, Randall, what you're teaching in the classroom is not what they're using. And then I have to explain a lot of native speakers don't follow the rules of grammar. So there are many reasons. I think we both agree that there are connections between listening, speaking, and grammar as well. Well, what I'd like to do is finish up today's broadcast with a couple of ideas. Number one, what advice do you have for online teachers? Just any general advice. Happy to hear any advice from teachers out there who are forging their own way. What is working? What is not working? So what advice would you give for teachers, either starting out or people kind of in the midst of things?
Well, for the teachers who are just starting their career as an online English teacher, I would say just be very, very open, because you're going to have not only students from your own country and from your own culture, but students from many different countries and very different cultures. The first thing is to be open-minded and open also not only to teach, but also to learn, because teaching is also learning to me. I learned a lot of things from my students, first of all, culturally, personally, it doesn't matter. Then also work on you very much and work on you even harder than you work on your students, because every time they ask you something, you should ask 2 questions more to yourself, because it's the best way to develop, to grow as a professional and as a specialist. I guess those are really good advice. I follow this advice and I think I grow a lot, really.
And I think the ideas of personalizing your instruction with students, very important.
Yes.
Understanding their situations and asking yourself, I often say, when I was 19 years old, I knew everything. And now that I'm in my 50s, I know nothing. And I think that's a really good point you mentioned, Shushanik, is the idea of continually reflecting on yourself and ready to grow. What about the future? What do you see the future for yourself personally and for online teaching and learning? What do you see over the next 5 years, for example?
Yes. Okay. So about myself, I really like teaching very much. I adore sharing my ideas worldwide, sharing this knowledge with different people from all the angles of the world. And I see myself in teaching, even if I choose any other career later. I see myself in teaching. I think that teaching will be like a part of my life, no matter what. Well, about online teaching, I think that online teaching is taking over the other tools, because nowadays many people don't have time to just spend time on the road, go to the language centers, or go to, I don't know, some other places to learn English. So they, like, for example, if they have 1 hour break, they say, okay, I can have a snack, and also I may have an English language lesson, so, or a language lesson. It doesn't matter, English or German or French, I don't know. And I guess that there is going to be a huge number of platforms teaching English and providing materials for the English language teachers. So yeah, it's developing all the time. They are becoming more and more, and you cannot even count. So it's like that.
Oh, so interesting. Let's look at a last couple of comments that we might have today. Let's see here. We have a comment. My daughter, really proud of you. Oh, is this your mom? Oh, that's
Yes.
really great. Really good to hear from your mom and participating in. I know that Riyadh had another question. He was talking about, what have you done as a teacher to convince your students? Do you think we should start with some free online courses so they can recognize advantages?
Mm-hmm.
And again, all of these questions, I think, how do you get things started? How do you convince students? How do you encourage them to stay engaged? Are all really good comments. And we hope that people after this episode will feel that they can share their comments as well. Well, Shushanik, I'd like to thank you for coming. But before we end, I have something kind of, to me, deeply meaningful. At the beginning of the presentation, I talked about that I think across the world, there are more threaded connections than we really realize from group to group. Sometimes when we talk about other cultures, we talk about how different they are, how exotic they are, rather than focus on the things that bring us together. So Shushanik, if I could go back right at the beginning, we looked at this particular picture of your country. Could you tell us what the national fruit of Armenia is? And I believe the fruit of Armenia is an apricot. And as I was preparing for the presentation, I went to my backyard. This is my backyard, and this is our apricot tree. And one of the things that I want to point out is that no matter where we go, whether it be friendship, whether it be love, whether it be compassion, whether it be whatever. Shushanik, are you there now?
Yes.
Oh, okay. So what is the national fruit of Armenia?
Oh,
do you have several of them?
Yeah, several of them. It's apricot. Apricot is the national fruit. Pomegranate is the national fruit of Armenia, yes.
Okay. So if you look at, this is my backyard. I took this picture in my backyard, and that tree right next to me is our apricot tree.
Oh my God, that's really interesting.
So even though it might be a different variety, even though apricot, it might be a different variety, still, this is what my point is in so many of my episodes, is that there are more that bind us together, more things that connect us. So even with a simple fruit as apricot, I love it. Yes, it might be a different variety, but there are more things that connect human beings together than the differences. And I think if we focus on that idea of similarities versus differences, we will all grow together. Let's see. I think if we have any last set, it says, thanks a lot for this interesting session. And again, thank you very much, Shushanik. And you had a great job. Keep up the work. Greetings from Armenia, and to my dearest friend, Shushan, apricot is our national fruit. So again, if we think about the things that bind us together, love, friendship, online teaching, compassion, empathy, and even fruit. And again, Shushan, if you ever come to this part of the world, you can try some of our fruit in the backyard. We'd love to have you. So again, thank you so much, Shushan, for joining us today. All right. So again, thank you very much, everyone, for joining. I think this has been a very interesting broadcast with Shushanik from Armenia, sharing her experiences and growth. as an online language teacher. Feel free to share any of your thoughts and comments. If you'd like to participate as a guest, share your ideas and so forth, we'd be happy to hear from you. Again, thank you very much for joining us, and we'll see you next time. Again, keep an eye on my Facebook page for upcoming episodes. Until the next one.